ozone hole, ozone problem, ozone research, and several policies. Scientists' efforts and policymakers brought to this day and to celebrate the only protocol, Montreal Protocol, which was very successful in order to control atmospheric or air pollutant ozone. Ozone depletion is now stopped. Now the healing is going on. It will take couple of decades, but the Montreal Protocol has given us credit that human policies, if we are willing to control, we can control the production as well as we can contribute new processes to know why this was happening, why pollution was more, why ozone was depleting, what are ODS, what are the alternate ODS, what are the alternate to ODS like CFC to HFC we have said. So this day is celebrated, and this gives a feeling that ozone is very important pollutant because it's a dedicated, globally dedicated day means there is something very serious or something very important. Definitely, ozone has got a lot of importance. Every government has ozone cell, and then ozone dedicated projects. Ozone, there are demand of this research related to chemical industry, environmental sector, and everywhere in NGOs also several employment are given based on ozone research. Now what I will make a small presentation, but before that let me share that we have a gathering of our students, researchers, then we have scientists. I welcome all and thanks to spare some time for this valuable day to dedicate toward the efforts to control and to save the ozone depletion. And now we have eminent panelists. Very carefully, I have selected these because they have delivered ozone research. They have delivered ozone policy. We have Dr. K.J. Ramesh, who was DG India Meteorology Department. Professor Madhoolika Agarwal, she has done a lot of work on crop and ozone effect. We have Vinayak Sinha, young researcher who has done a lot of work on ozone. And then I have invited Lisa Emberson, if she is there, otherwise she may be joining later. She has done a lot of work on ozone in Indian context. Then this, we have two young holistic representative, young YoHo. We have young holistic program in school. I have started after my internship. Then this program basically involves holistic development of the student. It's a kind of outreach program. So two young holistic, they will be sharing their thoughts. It's only basically to provide them platform to develop their leadership qualities. And then we have Swati, Program Officer of ENVIS. The program is organized under the aegis of SES, JNU, then Holistic Environment, and Holistic Program, and ENVIS. ENVIS is funded by the Ministry of Environmental and Climate Change. And in fact, I invited Geeta Menon, takes care of the ozone cell, but she was so busy. Otherwise, we could have her views also about this day. So, with this small introduction, I will start. The two slides I will show because we have done work on some analysis we found about ozone. Is it coming something? Huh? Who wants to share the content? Share? It is not sharing. Present a window. something coming? Because Google, this Google Meet is very slow when you load it compared to Zoom.
So not yet. Presentation is not visible.
Now?
No, sir.
Now?
Yes, something is present. Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir.
First slide is there, increasing. Are you able to see?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Very good. So I am just telling now, recently we have seen the ozone levels in ambient air are increasing in Delhi. So we did some analysis and we found very interesting result, which is basically non-traditional station compared to what people think normally. If you see this slide is the ozone level at DTU site, CPCB data it is because I am member of EPCA. So I focus on this and DTU, Mundka, that area. I focus. If you see this compared to 17 and 18 and 18 and 19, ozone level of May, June, July, this was increased level in 2019 compared to 18. And in lockdown, again we are hearing that ozone is increased. Why this ozone is increased, I will tell you. But before that, another thing you have to see that now air is clean, nothing is there. Because of them in the beginning, EPCA made some efforts by GRAP and other programs, SUFFER in collaboration with SUFFER. The GRAP, whenever it was implemented, the air quality index was lowered and air quality was improved. So this is the figure. If you see during July, August 2019, air was clean. What we say today is much cleaner because of total shutdown. But in 1819 also after GRAP, air was clean, visibility was more. So we can see from IIT to Agra Expressway building, from IIT to Badarpur Thermal Plant. So this was the small model done in 1819 in Delhi. Before that, there was some closure in China also. So when you control emissions from industry, you control many things. And that is because you are not having any energy source or fuel source. So what happened? That the quenching of ozone is stopped. This is something new I have contributed. The ozone is not more, but the quenching, which was happening due to release of chlorine, HCl from plastic burning, which is stopped in 1819. And after that, that factor plus vehicular NO and NO2 release was stopped. So the chemistry of this destruction chemistry has two elements. Normally this element is only believed NO and NO2 but we have seen and we did a lot of research and earlier data also IISER did that ozone is now not destructed. The ban on burning on plastic waste and other polymers that has helped to reduce emission of chlorine and hydrochloric acid in the air, and that is why the HCl is now not consuming that. Ozone is seen as built up, but it is not really. So that this is a scenario now in lockdown. There are two things you have to be very clear. Before lockdown, clear visibility, ban on plastic in the sea, so the release of HCl was stopped. Little control, but ozone was further increased in pandemic lockdown when everything was closed. So the situation in Delhi became like rural areas. In rural areas, we have more NO2 compared to NO. Similarly, here in Delhi, it happened. And what happened? The people have observed higher chloride in Delhi air. So I also, long back when there was a fire in plastic scrap market of Delhi in 1996-95, we published a paper and we found very high fluxes of chloride in their air. So plastic burning gives chloride. There is a research, already it is published research that Cl and Cl2 are liberated. So that is one chemistry, making a sense, considering that fact that the chlorine is also very important to measure. We cannot escape even HCl. So in new air quality standard, we have to now include chlorine and HCl also as the criteria pollutant. For that, we have to do exercise. So with these words, I end my brief talk here. Thank you very much. And now I invite Dr. KJ Ramesh to talk about something. But before that, let me introduce him formally. Dr. KJ Ramesh was Director General of India Meteorology Department. Then before that, he was advisor to Earth Science Department and Atmospheric Science since 2007. And before that, he was working on NCMWRF. He holds PhD in numerical modeling from IIT Delhi. Dr. Ramesh, please. Hello.
Sir, have to unmute.
Dr. Ramesh, please unmute yourself. सर अनम्यूट करिए अपने को. डॉक्टर रमेश. नहीं अभी नहीं आया. हो गया.
Thank you so much. I will have to present my screen. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And Ozone Day greetings to all of you. And as it was mentioned by Professor Umesh Kulshrestha, although we have taken several steps globally through Montreal Protocol implementation successfully, ODS from chlorofluorocarbons we could eliminate, and we could see the recovery of the ozone hole taking place gradually, and then that was a big success of the global effort. As we have seen, that is a demonstration of global effort when everybody joins together on a global cause, so we can achieve the results in a successful manner, provided technology transfer and other knowledge transfer mechanisms put in place. And that is what is expected now from the Paris Agreement and other actions under disaster risk reduction and actions under sustainable development goals. See, global hand-holding is required, and as we all know that there is a lot of awareness about the impacts due to extreme weather events and increased climate risk and disaster risk, and clean air and more carbon in the atmosphere, and problems associated with biomass in soil and rural poverty has become part of the societal goals now. Apart from only the disaster risk reduction, etc., which we were talking, climate action, now the campaign of clean air has captured the attention of the people, and at the same time, a lot of loss to the nature and natural resources and ecosystems is also happening, and that is not, that kind of hidden risk is not fully accounted in our actions. So mainly the carbon dioxide releases are now concentrations have gone to unprecedented level. Earlier peak of carbon dioxide we have crossed in 1950. Current levels is about 412 ppm. And due to COVID-19 lockdown, there is a precipitous drop in the emissions of greenhouse gases has been noticed, and then this is very significant, and this decrease is because of shutting down of industries and main emitting sectors. Reduced action. So clearly, sharp fall in carbon dioxide, SO2, and NOx has been noticed. And in terms of concentrations, although emissions have reduced during the pandemic time, but concentrations have not been reduced. So the even August 7th, 2020 record shows about 412.8 ppm, and 1 year back it was 410. So increase in carbon dioxide concentration has not been seen, although considerable reduction in the emissions of the greenhouse gases itself has been noticed significantly during the pandemic time. And the same is true with other greenhouse gases like methane, N2O, and SF6. Not decrease has been seen during the pandemic as expected and explained just a few seconds before. And all we have to now rightly focus our energies in tackling climate change. And now for this, the world has to be putting enough care and attention not to neglect the ozone layer. As we have seen, the background is known. We have started seeing the recovery of the ozone hole, and ozone depletion recovery is now since 2000 recorded between 1 to 3% per decade. So at the projected rates, northern hemisphere mid-latitude ozone expected to heal completely by 2030, while southern hemisphere is anticipated to get recovered by 2050. In poles, definitely by 2060, if the present rate of recovery continues. These are some quantified figures that have been published in the literature, and I am bringing to your attention. All the more, all these efforts so far has resulted by co-benefit is about 135 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions have been averted. So this is a big co-benefit. So by taking effort to minimize the ozone hole impact and recovery process put in place with the successful implementation of Montreal Protocol, it is giving us co-benefit of very significant 135 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So there are, the way it is now presented, we have to deal weather, climate, water, air quality, environment, all together in our actions so that sustainable development goals can be achieved. See, we know why it is implemented now. Now there is a amendment to Montreal Protocol done through Kigali amendment, it is called. So now we are focusing on phasing down hydrofluorocarbons after successfully reducing CFCs. Now HFCs, these are short-term warming potential gases. So we have to work on now global once we do this, incremental warming can definitely be reduced. In short-term warming can definitely be reduced. At the same time, regenerating the ozone layer. And there is a united assessment of science by several UN bodies has been brought out last week. It clearly says the recent 5 years after the Paris Agreement has been signed, these 5 years are found to be the warmest so far in the 5-year periods, and the lockdown-related fall in emissions will not reduce carbon dioxide concentrations. We have seen those figures just a few minutes before, and there is a clear statement from the UN bodies clearly saying that although emissions have been fall in emissions has been seen, but it will not contribute to reduce carbon dioxide concentrations. And global fossil fuel emissions have risen by about 62% from 1990, post 1990 to 20-year period of 2019. So very, very significant increase of CO2 emissions has been noticed. and consumption patterns have to change to support the climate action. So consumption of food or consumption of resources like water and management of soil and other things. So resources available from the ecosystem services have to be pruned down, and baseline consumption levels we should go back, and then only we will have our climate actions will be successful, because there in the transition period impacts are more, and resilience is not there into our systems, so it will take more time for our systems to become resilient. And climate change impacts are seen right from mountain peaks to ocean depths. Oceans are warming. Ocean is warmed up to even 700 meters down from the sea surface, and that's how maximum impact is seen at the peaks of the mountains and as well as in the ocean depths. And glacier and snow melt has increased, and that will create water supplies to the communities dependent on glacier fed rivers. And because of extreme impacts of the climate variability, droughts and floods are likely to produce more impacts. Clearly, floods are the biggest damage potential events now globally. Flood becomes the number one of the damage, loss to the infrastructure, loss to the assets, etc., etc. Although loss of life has been minimized gradually because of improved early warning, but loss to infrastructure, loss to assets has not been able to reduce, and a lot of weak resilience is there in terms of floods and droughts, even cyclones. Early warning, loss of life we could minimize, but not the loss to the assets and infrastructure and livelihoods. And because of ice melt in the glaciers and the poles, sea level rise is accelerated. So these are important things on climate action. WMO has given a statement on all the issues on global atmospheric watch. Carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases has increased in 2019 and 2020, and overall emissions reductions in 2020 will not contribute to any reduction, and sustained reduction in emissions are required to stabilize the global warming, although we are working towards that under Paris Agreement. And fossil fuel emissions have reached a high in 2019, and that high was recorded high was 36.7 gigatons, and carbon emissions will decline in 2020, that we have discussed about it. Global methane emissions from human activities is on increase, that we have seen, even our measurements show that. And clearly, current emissions of carbon dioxide, methane are not compatible at all with emission pathways consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2100 or 2 degrees, keeping it below 2 degrees by 2100 as per the goal of Paris Agreement. So we have to do much more. And ocean and cryosphere, IPCC has said ocean and cryosphere are changing fast, and impacts in ocean and cryosphere have been at its peak now. And water and cryosphere related issues like floods and droughts have to be handled in minimizing the impacts, adverse impacts from those extreme climate events. And water is a key factor because it's a lifeline for the mankind. So we have to have first priority adaptations for water. And global climate between 2024, and the statement for that is surface temperature, growing chance of annual global mean temperature reaching 1.5 degrees by 2024 possibility exists, but being 20% in the last 5-year period ending 2024. And there is a high risk of unusual regional rainfall over the period in some areas, and that will lead to peaking of drought and flood related impacts and associated risks. Within the next 5 years, Arctic is predicted to continue to warm at more than twice the overall global rise of temperature. And UNEP has brought out the gap. We have seen a statement a few seconds before, and clearly emission gap by 2030 is estimated to be 12 to 15 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent to limit the global warming by 22 degrees by 2100. But for aspirational 1.5 degree goal, you have to reduce further by 29 to 32 gigatons to see the global warming is restricted to 1.5 degrees. So this is some of the figures that were brought out in United in Science. This is a new report brought out by all UN bodies last week. And for bridging this emission gap, we require urgent and concerted actions by all sectors and all countries. And observations during COVID time definitely have impacted the quality of forecast, particularly aircraft-based observations were maximum. Second to satellite-based observations for our data assimilation for prediction of weather in 3 to 10 days in advance. And in terms of other factors, lot of resilience need to be built to our observing systems in times to come. This is a new eye-opener for maintaining the observing systems. And in terms of air quality, ozone and other things, we fortunately have an inventory of daily basis and weekly basis on monthly basis created both for aerosols and greenhouse gases by the Copernicus atmospheric monitoring system of Europe. And these are the very, all sectors are covered in this. So it's the resolution of 0.1 degree by 0.1 degrees. I'm just giving a glimpse. This is a black carbon in November 2019. This is a distribution of carbon monoxide in November 2019, 15 and 19, sorry, November 2019. Similarly, carbon dioxide, methane, NOx. So we have these data sets using for air quality prediction in India, and this is a benzene distribution. And in terms of black carbon emission from the transport sector, this is the global map generated by CAMS. And in terms of NOx emitted by aircrafts, and then NOx emitted by ships along their shipped routes is carbon monoxide from ships. And they also compare with their distribution fields globally by the Sentinel observations, and comparison is very good, particularly in terms of hotspots of high zones of high concentrated zones of nitrogen oxide. So this is a new parameter that is available and new global data that is available for doing air quality and environment related forecasting linked to atmospheric modeling. This is a new survey started 2 years before. From that, if you plot certain things, PM10 on left side shows before the pandemic, after, during the pandemic, and after the first lockdown. So there are some changes seen in this CAMS data sets. Similarly, PM2.5, we can see clear reduction as it is seen, but not so much reduction in the second lockdown period over India in CAMS data sets. This is the variation we have seen pre and during and post serious first lockdown of carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide. There are good changes have been brought out in some parameters and not in some parameters. We'll have to see at least on day-to-day basis when analysis has been done. This is, but NO2 is good, NO is good. Similarly, surface ozone, as we have seen, it is reduced, but not significantly and everywhere. The regions just now mentioned by Professor Kulshrestha. And another important thing which I want to show is Delhi-related variations during the first pandemic lockdown and prior to that lockdown. So there is this is a plot of PM 2.5 from all the stations of Delhi. Whenever rainfall is there, during that time, a lot of reductions have been noticed. And another important factor, PM25 had epochs of high concentrations of PM 2.5 leading to haze in the early morning hours of the pandemic. And that's because of the upper panel blue curve shows about the variations, hourly variations of the PM 2.5. That hourly variation is coincided with, in the lower panel, with increased humidity content. So in the early morning hours of 6 to 9 hours, so this kind of high concentration epochs have been noticed during the pandemic. That is only for a few hours. That is because of the haze formation taking place, and those are the reasons for seeing the increased concentrations of PM 2.5. Otherwise, in other days, concentrations are very low. And similarly, if you see the 2 minutes measurements of PM 2.5 that's available in Dwarka, so you will see the similar peak of around 6 to 9 hours in the morning only. That kind of increase has been seen, and that is associated with increased solar radiation. Subsequently will bring it down. In terms of ozone, clearly if you see over Delhi, between 19 and 20, tropospheric ozone is less in 2020, but there are some epochs where even in 2020 concentrations of tropospheric ozone are higher. So those reasons are mentioned already. And another important factor for Delhi is fire counts. In the fire counts, if you see from 2005 to 2018, I'm covering most of the air quality and environment and climate related issues, flagging the issues to you. And Punjab has been the leading state in terms of the fire counts, and next is Haryana and Pakistan also significantly. When you combine all the three, so year on year variability, you can clearly see there is some decrease in Punjab, definitely post 2016, but that is not very significant. But there is some decrease, but Haryana we have not seen that much change. But in terms of climatology of fire counts and fire counts of 2018, clearly there is a sharp increase of fire counts in 2018, well above the climatological fire count level. And in that classification again, 74% of the counts are accounted from Punjab, and next Haryana and Pakistan and other small states, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh also contribute in a very small way. So in terms of those peaks of PM 2.5 during that fire burning takes place in Punjab during the harvest time of Kharif, model prediction has been forecast models have been set up by India Meteorological Department and the IITM, which are operational from 2018. So 2018 figure clearly shows there is without fire counts, PM 2.5 in blue color won't show the peaks. But when you include fire counts in air quality predictions of PM 2.5, clearly additional peaks coinciding with the observed increase in fire counts is clearly seen. But there are differences, but still a lot of work has to be carried out. At least peaking of PM 2.5 concentrations and their timings are captured by the model, although there is some difference in terms of the concentrations. And as we have seen, definitely about 20% of the PM 2.5 concentration in Delhi during post-monsoon was found to be contributed to non-local fire emissions. So this is one particular quantitative figure has been brought out by the recent publications of March 2020, and this is a good contribution to make. However, in some of the high episodic events of PM 2.5, contribution from the fire counts individually can go up to 50 to 75%, but overall on average sense it is about 20%. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity and sharing these important aspects with you all. Thank you. Umesh ji? Hello?
Hi, Lisa.
Umesh ji?
Hi, sorry everybody. Yes, I can hear you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you all too.
Umesh ji?
Oh, very sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much.
I left it because I got one phone call. So
No
I'm
issue.
okay. So now next panelist we have eminent Professor Madhoolika Agarwal from Varanasi University. She has done a lot of work on ozone and plant research, damage to plants and all phytotoxic effect of ozone. Professor Madhoolika is well known. She is fellow of Indian National Science Academy, National Academy of Sciences, Botanical Society of India. She has received several awards. No need to mention basically we can save time. Now I invite Professor Madhoolika to share her expertise and views and deliver something of student interest so that they can realize the potential how to protect ozone layer and how to protect environment. Madam, please.
Okay, so good day to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm very thankful to Professor Kulshrestha for inviting me for this Ozone Day talk, and I'm very excited to see some of those with whom I have a very long association. But during this period of time, we have not met or we have not much conversation. So at least see them on virtually, it's really good. So like Lisa, like Usha, and of course Professor Umesh Kulshrestha, to whom I can see on this at present. There may be many more here. So because it's a restricted time, I have no presentation because it's a panel discussion. The topic which is we are going to discuss is the ozone layer. And you all know that ozone layer is not only restricted to the stratosphere, but also in the troposphere, ozone layer is there. Professor Kulshrestha already mentioned that ozone layer, which is in the surface or in the troposphere, and how it is behaving at the moment during this pandemic period. So I have been working on both. For ozone layer depletion, I was working because of the ozone layer depletion. There is more UVB which is coming on the earth. So I have worked a lot on impact of UVB on plants. That's the first thing. And then the tropospheric ozone and how this tropospheric ozone affects the plants. So both way I have worked on the both layers, that is the stratospheric and the tropospheric. You all know that why this day is being celebrated. And the one most important point of celebration is also we celebrate many days, but there is not very good stories for that. But at least we should be thankful that because of the Montreal Protocol, which was started after Vienna Convention 35 years back, that now the healing of the ozone layer has started. I think you all have heard that during March in the Arctic region there was a huge hole detected that's more than the North American size during the March. It was not detected before with that much dimension. However, it used to be very, very frequent in the South Pole or in the Antarctica. So for a few days, it remained only for a few days, and then later on it was healed. So it clearly showed that the CFCs are there. They have not completely gone out of the picture. So they are there. And if the environmental conditions in that area or the climatic condition in the area will be somewhat similar to that of the Antarctica, they may cause even, a greater damage to the ozone layer in future also. So this is one of the very important cause of concern to see the science behind it, that how it has happened. Of course, it has happened because of the lower temperature and a type of vortex situation appeared as it used to appear in the Antarctica region. But thankfully, it has healed very fast. And then at least we are celebrating the success at the moment. But it is true that after 2015, the ozone layer depletion in the stratosphere is slowing down at a much greater pace compared to before 2015. So it's a happy story that how different countries joined together, they made a policy, the Montreal Protocol was enforced, and most importantly, it is implemented properly. As said in the earlier talk, that almost 99.9% of the ozone depleting substances, they have been banned, and new chemicals have been introduced so that this kind of healing continues. As said earlier also, that there was in 2016 there was an amendment through the Kigali Amendment, where it was thought of even banning the HFCs, because these HFCs were not reaching up to the stratosphere and causing ozone layer depletion, but these were highly radiatively very important gas. They have very, very high, several thousand times higher radiative potential compared to the carbon dioxide. So that's very good that in the Montreal Protocol, we are not just only thinking about this one of the, but we are also holistically looking into other problems, that if we move to an alternative, whether that alternative is sustainable or not for other environmental factors. Because you all must be knowing, when the CFCs were invented somewhere in 1920 or so, and that was first used by General Motors, and then it was something which has come up and had no direct impact on human being or on other ecosystem services. So it was thought that it is going to be very helpful in all our cooling and all other systems. But slowly and slowly, after many, many years, it was found that these CFCs, you all know that Rowland and Molina, they were the one who could get this chemical interaction, and finally they said this has happened, and later on they got the Nobel Prize along with Khrushchev. So, but this time, this we must be very happy that along with this CFCs, HFCs, which are the alternatives of CFCs introduced, who have the smaller life cycle compared to earlier ones, CFCs. So this is a good step. We have done a lot of work on impact of ultraviolet B radiation, and we have found a variety of impacts on plants. Either they are the cereal crops, or they are leguminous plants, or they are the medicinally important plants. The leguminous plants are mostly found to be most sensitive to the elevated levels of ultraviolet, while the cereal crops are not bad as the leguminous plant. And the medicinal plants, one of the most important thing that the ultraviolet B radiation is a kind of elicitor to enhance the phytochemical formation in the medicinally important plants. We have done still, my colleague, Prof. Agarwal's students are working on many medicinally important plants, and they have shown that how in the secondary metabolism, one of the component enhances, whether that is more important medicinally or that is less important medicinally, that's a matter of research, what they are actually doing. So this ultraviolet B radiation, which is, that at least, for our vitamin D formation, it is important. It reduces many of our skin eczemas and all other things. But otherwise, it is also causing a great impact on human health. The increase in cataract is also because of this ultraviolet B radiation. The immunity, which is the talk of the everywhere, immunity is being talked about, and there is a direct impact of this ultraviolet B radiation on human immunity and also on the skins. So with the reduction of ultraviolet B radiation as a result of healing of ozone layer in the stratosphere, we are going to save many more lives, because it also causes melanomas in the skin, even in the eyes. So it's very, very life-saving effort which has been made internationally by all the nations and by all the people through its proper implementation. So that's something, the story of the ozone, which is the good ozone and situated in the stratosphere. Now coming to the ozone, which is present in the stratosphere, I know Lisa will be talking more about tropospheric ozone. So, and you need to listen her. She has made a very significant contribution in her work, not only in the European country, but also in Indian country. We had a long-term association with several projects. And that is how, we are still working on some or other papers and other things, even right now. So in the tropospheric ozone, also, we compared the sensitivity of many crops, almost wheat varieties which are popularly grown in India, several rice varieties, then even maize varieties, and also, many vegetables and this. Again, I would say that wheat is found to be one of the sensitive crop of the to tropospheric ozone. The tropospheric ozone, which is given, elevated levels of tropospheric ozone is being supplemented through gases in the open top chambers or through the free air exposures. And then it is found that there is a large scale variability in their susceptibility. There are some varieties which don't show any reduction in productivity, wherever there are some varieties which show even 25% reduction in the productivity. So we also worked on that what works upon these kind of variability. So some of the resistant varieties, they don't allow ozone to enter into the plant body by regulating the stomatal flux. Lisa will certainly be talking about this. And then in some of them, even if ozone comes inside, so they have a very robust defense system. It's plants' immunity. And that defense system make them scavenge different free radicals which are produced by ozone entry into the plant body. You know, ozone is an oxidant. So when ozone enters into the plant body, it generates many numbers of free radicals or reactive oxygen species. And then these reactive oxygen species work on the cell membrane and enter into the cell, and then the cell organelle. So depending upon the immunity of a particular cultivar of the plant, there is variation. Maize is not that sensitive. Very low yield responses are reductions have been found in maize varieties. Even rice is also intermediately sensitive. It's not that sensitive as the wheat. Now, why wheat becomes very sensitive? You know, if you see that we grow wheat in November and we harvest in March or April. In January, you know, December and January, our ozone levels are very low. And then suddenly, you know, when there is more availability of sunshine hours, the ozone levels goes up. And ozone levels are high during March. And March is the time when, you know, we have our grain setting of wheat. We have the reproductive, the wheats after setting, there is mature and all things going on. So that elevated ozone or the ambient ozone, that affects the plants during their reproductive period, and that makes a large impact on the yield reductions. So that is something very important, that why wheat becomes very sensitive to this. Similarly, you know, it's not only the cultivated plants which are affected by tropospheric ozone, but there are grassland species, there are tree species.
No voice. Swati, no voice.
Yes, I think Madhu, ma'am.
Okay. She will enter again.
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't know what has happened. So I will cut it short now. We have done a study in the grasslands, in semi-natural grasslands, where we exposed that area for 3 years. And we have found a lot of changes in, of course, the diversity of plants. The one which are sensitive, they have started showing the low numbers, while those which are more robust or sensitive, they have increased their numbers. So the dominance has changed over there. We have found even impacts on the soil characteristics, basically, you know, on the microbial activities, the microbial biomass. So these experiments, which have not been done at a very large scale, they also show that we are just thinking about the cultivated plants, but we should also think about the natural systems like grassland and the forest systems, because these grassland and forest systems are equally responsive to the elevated ozone And most importantly, the level of ozone is higher in the natural areas and in the rural areas. It's not very high in the urban areas. As Professor Kulshrestha said that, the titration of ozone takes place. So when nitric oxide is higher, or when chlorine is higher, or other components are higher, so they reduce the ozone concentration. But when they are not higher, then the concentration used to increase. So in totality, what I would say clearly that of course the healing of ozone layer in the stratosphere is a very welcome move internationally, and it is successful. But we need to think about the tropospheric ozone also, because tropospheric ozone can impact our food security, can impact our natural ecosystem, and most importantly, it can impact our human health. You all are environmental science students, so you must be knowing that the ozone has been included in the criteria air pollutant, and a standard has been set for ozone only in 2009. Before 2009, nobody was ready to listen that ozone is a pollutant. Myself and Lisa, last 20 years, we are presenting our work at various forums in India. Of course, to the policy people I'm asking about, not the academicians only, that, ozone is causing this impact on the plant. And thankfully, in 2009, a standard has come, which is, of course, a standard based on human health. But we need to have some standards for vegetation or for food security also, so that, our plants can be saved or our vegetation can be saved in future. So what I suggest all of you to see into the literature, that what are their impacts directly on the plants or on the vegetation or on the human being, and then you will able to see that there is a need to reduce it. And there is again a success story for these also, that the precursor gases, emission of precursor gases of ozone have been reduced in Europe, have been reduced in United States of America, but it's still an increase in India and in entire Asia. Even in China, SO2 has gone down, but nitrogen dioxide emission has increased. So both India and China, which are supposed to be more polluted, most polluted, so we need to do the kind of enforcement. We have those standards we have everything with us, but enforcement needs to be done to reduce the emission of precursor gases of tropospheric ozone, so that we can reduce this, and then we do the many stakeholder meetings, and we let the farmers know that what are the crops they should grow, what are the wheat varieties they should grow, so that they may not be that high yield losses. So those kind of things we are already doing. So, and one thing I just want to add over here, that we have not many ozone monitoring stations in agricultural areas. Most of the monitoring stations are present in the urban environment where ozone is titrated. So we are not able to get a real glimpse of ozone concentration. And hence there is need to have more monitoring stations in India, in the remote areas and natural environment, and in the rural areas. So with all this discussion, I wish all of you a very safe and healthy life during this pandemic, wherein also other pollutants have gone down, but tropospheric ozone has not gone down. And again, for this ozone day, we should celebrate it with all our happiness, because tropospheric ozone layer in its stratosphere is heating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Madhoolika. A very important message you have given, that we have to have more station for ozone monitoring in rural areas, and also there is need for farmer education regarding crops, not to have any ozone impact. We have to show that type of crop. Thank you very much, madam. And now we have our another panelist, and lot of work she has done, Professor Richa Emberson from UK. Richa Emberson is a professor in environmental science in the Environment and Geology Department at University of York. Earlier, she was working on in the Stockholm Environment Institute, York, from 11 to 2019. She has done a lot of work on SO2, NO2 ozone, SPM. She was part of APINA project, and she has been involved in enough global assessment for short-lived climate pollutants. She did her PhD from Imperial College, London. With these introducing words, I invite Richa to say a few words, share her expertise, and what is the way forward for ozone control. Richa, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Umesh. If it's okay, I can share my screen.
Yes, please.
I'll try and do that.
And let me share that when I invited, Richa readily agreed, because I also know Richa and her colleague Kevin Hicks. In the same network we have been working. So Richa has done a lot of work on India also, as Professor Madhoolika told. Yes, Richa, now screen is there, please.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So hopefully you can see the big main
Sorry,
screen.
you could not get admitted there, and felt some problem was there in network. Now it's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the wonders of modern day technology meant I could WhatsApp you there, Umesh, so that was incredibly helpful. So, yes, as Madhoolika was saying, that we've done quite a lot of work over the past 10 or 20 years or so trying to understand the impacts of ground level or tropospheric ozone on agriculture in particular in India. And I've just got a few slides. I don't really want to talk for too long, but I've just got a few slides which will hopefully try to give you an indication of the key results that we have found during that work, and then also provide some ideas perhaps of the way forwards in terms of how research should start to develop, especially from a modelling and risk assessment point of view, to really try to get a better understanding of what the implications of ozone pollution are to farmers in particular in the Indian context. Oh, can you still see things? Sorry, I just had hopefully you can still see my screen. So I just wanted to give some highlight results really. So we know that in India, wheat productivity is particularly threatened by ozone pollution. There's been a whole host of studies over the past 20, 30 years looking at impacts in India, both experimental evidence, and Madhoolika has been one of the main players collating all of that experimental evidence across India, and then also turning that experimental evidence into estimates of regional losses in terms of production and yield losses. So here are just a headline figure that if we're thinking about wheat as being a very important crop in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, then we're likely to be seeing yield losses in the region of 15 to 20% across India. And those yield losses are likely to turn into wheat production losses, and those wheat production losses will come with economic crop losses as well in the region of 0.5 to 5 billion US dollars. So we're talking about potentially a really quite a serious problem for Indian agriculture. And in part, the reason why India, and Madhoolika also mentioned China, are particularly at risk from ozone pollution and lost agricultural production from that pollutant is due to the climate, India's climate, and also the crop management practices such as irrigation practices that go on in the region to be able to cope with that climate and be able to ensure that there's still healthy production in arable crops across the country. And here, just show a figure which gives an indication of the lost production due to ozone for different countries around the globe. You can see India is placed second here, and you can also see that arguably one of the reasons for that is because of the tropical moist and tropical dry climate that India experiences. And Madhoolika also very nicely discussed and described a little bit about how ozone actually causes damage, whether it's the ozone concentration in the air or rather the ozone flux or the ozone uptake by the plant. And this is one of the reasons why that Indian climate is more likely to be causing damage, because you're more likely to be providing conditions which allow ozone to be taken up by the crops such as wheat. And that uptake, as well as the climate, can also be enhanced by certain crop management practices, again, such as irrigation. If you irrigate a field, then the stomates are likely to be more open because you're enhancing the amount of CO2 that's taken up for photosynthesis. At the same time, you're also enhancing the amount of ozone that is taken up. And what I show here is a cartoon schematic of a dose model. So this is a risk assessment model that we have developed in Europe, but we're starting to apply it in other countries around the world, which accounts for this ozone concentration, but then also the amount of ozone that is actually taken up by the stomates and causes damage to the plant. So we end up with this stomatal ozone flux, which is a function of our ozone concentration, and our stomatal conductance, which we can estimate in various different ways. Here we describe a multiplicative stomatal conductance model to estimate that conductance. So that's good. We can get some reasonable estimates of the kind of size of effect that ozone is having in terms of lost productivity. But especially if we think about somewhere like India, we know that wheat is affected by a whole range of different stresses over the growing season. So here we have a growing season for a wheat crop. We know that there's going to be water stress and hence the need for irrigation of that crop. We know that if we're starting to look into the future, then we might see increases in CO2 concentration. So then we might have the benefit, potentially, of CO2 fertilization. We know that towards the end of the growing season in India, the wheat crop can suffer very considerably from heat stress. And in the future, that's very likely to increase even further and cause problems. And then towards the end of the growing season, we also have this ozone stress problem. And all of these will be affecting yield. And I just thought I'd sort of pop in there as well that UVB radiation will also be something that might also affect yield as well. So we have this constellation of ozone causing multiple problems which can impact on yield. So ideally, I think this is one of the things that I want to sort of put forward. We need better or more complex or models that are able to cope with these different stresses. So for example, we could use something like a modified ozone dose model so that we can actually start to bring in the aspect of crop growth that ozone can affect, but that will also be affected by other stresses as well. So for example, here you can see on this schematic that we've got our gases in the atmosphere, so ozone, CO2, water vapor leaving the plant. Here's our stomatal conductance. We can estimate our gross photosynthesis based on the amount of CO2 that's coming into the plant. We can then, once we've assimilated that carbon, allocate it to different plant parts. We can then get an idea of the yield that you might see under those particular conditions. And then we can start to bring in other stresses such as water stress and nutrient availability and so on. And then we've got a working model that allows us to really understand the combination of a whole host of different stresses on plant growth. And just to mention here as well, we've got these sort of respiration growth and respiration maintenance aspects of the model. Madhoolika mentioned that many varieties have the possibility to detoxify ozone that's taken up, and this would allow us some flexibility to be able to bring that kind of aspect into the model as well. So that would then allow us to perhaps have a better idea of what are the different stresses, the size of the different stresses that are impacting grain yield. So here, for example, we have over time, we can see how the farm yield and the potential yield for the Punjab state has changed since 1990, sort of getting close-ish to the present day. And we can see here that there's this yield gap. So if we understand the impact of these different stresses on yield, we might be able to attribute parts of this yield gap to those different stresses. But then I just want, in the last couple of slides, to also ask the question, if we know that ozone and other stresses are influencing yield, then that would tell us that the yield will also affect the price of the commodity. And it would be interesting to understand and explore what the consequences of that change in yield and consequent change in price are having on producers and consumers and on government fiscal policy. So with these next few slides, I want to just introduce some ideas to you to see what people think.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sorry?
Yeah, sorry, this is Vinayak. Sorry to interrupt. It's just that the slides are not, somehow they're not being shared, so it's not visible. I think some others had this problem too. Could you just maybe check that? It would be a shame to lose your wonderful talk.
Yes, okay, I can
that.
try. So if I try sharing, according to my Google Meet, my presentation is still, there we go, hang on, let's try stop sharing and sharing again.
Yes.
Yeah, can you see something?
Yes,
I
can.
Not
Thank you
do
so
that
much.
all the time.
In the middle it was off, otherwise.
Okay. So I had got to, let's see. I can share these slides with you as well afterwards if that would help. But well,
thank you.
So these were the slides that you might have missed. And I got to here.
Okay.
And I was just saying, so I'll go through this quickly. We can start to use economic analysis, so supply and demand curves, to try and give us an understanding of how, if we change yield, the price will change. And then we can try to use that economic analysis to then understand the impacts on producers versus the impacts on consumers. What we found is that if you are to clean the air, so you remove ozone from the air, your price will drop according to your supply and demand curves. The influence of this on producers means that farmers' yields will increase with no additional cost to the farmer, but the price at which farmers will be able to sell their produce will fall. Those losses might be insulated by the minimum support price, which is provided by the government, but that would come at a cost to the government, and the farmers may change to another crop, which would be more economically productive for them. For consumers, the reduced price of food would mean that they may well have better access to food, so this has real implications for food security. And it could also increase the household capital, so that households can spend on other goods and services. So there are quite broad-reaching implications of something which we tend to think of in a more biophysical way as being the impact of stresses on yield. As soon as we start to consider how that impacts price, then we start to understand some of these broader issues and implications of our environment. And I just wanted to, final slide this is, I just wanted to sort of show an even broader context than that. So here we have an agro ecosystem, we have agricultural production and post-harvest, and then we have agricultural livelihoods, other livelihoods, and all of this feeds into food security and nutrition. A lot of the time we talk about getting to the answer of whether ozone impacts on food security, but really you need to understand all of this to be able to answer that question. And I've just circled here in red some of the things that we are now able to encapsulate in the models that we use. So we have atmospheric composition, we're able to bring in some aspects of climate change, temperature, precipitation, water availability. We can even start to look at some of those extreme events, such as the really high temperatures that you see at the end of the wheat growing season. And we can focus on cultivated plants. We can then get an idea of how agricultural production is affected. And then if we start to think about how price might then be affected, we can start to get an indication of how these things might affect agricultural livelihoods and therefore food security and nutrition. And that's really all I wanted to say. I hope that's sort of been useful just to maybe make people think about the broader way in which some of this research could and perhaps should go in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richa, for this wonderful talk. I think students are having a lot of interest in your talk. There are questions before going to Vinayak. Where in India the surface ozone pollution is highly recorded and whether surface ozone levels pose threat to food security in India. So I request Professor Madhoolika, if you answer, it's related to your talk.
You said where in India ozone levels are high?
Yes.
Okay. Indo-Gangetic Plain, IGP is the most representative area where the ozone concentrations are highest in India.
Oh, okay.
In south, concentrations are lesser than northern India.
Yes, and the other question is quite obvious. Ozone pose threat to food security. It is there. No. Now,
so Lisa has already answered it.
Yes.
That when production will be lower, then it will affect availability also, and the cost will go up. And that is how that. I also talked about the nutritional quality. So nutritionally also, the produce is going to be inferior as compared to in the normal condition.
True, madam. Thank you very much. And now I invite Dr. Vinayak Sinha from IISER Mohali. He is expert in atmospheric and analytical chemistry and doing a lot of work on different types of pollutants, VOCs, GHGs, ammonia. And then he has several facilities in his laboratory department he has established.
Hello.
Dr. Sinha has got a Nasi Scopus Award for his excellent research. He is SSC member of IISER and also he is SSC member of Integrated Land Ecosystem Atmosphere Process Study Global Research Program. He is well known. Now, without wasting time, Vinayak, please share your view.
Yes. Can you all hear me and can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
And you can hear me as well. That's great. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Let me tell you, Vinayak, already he was having one assignment today, but thankful to Vinayak, you accepted it, and now you are free after this presentation to attend your meeting. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Umesh. So first of all, I'd like to wish a very good afternoon to everyone, and also thank Professor Umesh Kulshrestha. And it was really great to hear some of the leading pioneers of related to tropospheric ozone research, and also in general somebody who could give overview of what's happening with regard to ozone research, both in the stratosphere and troposphere. Right. So I thought I'll put together a few slides just for the students. So please excuse if it's a sort of repetition, but then I also hope you will find some new insights. So this is a picture of, how the ozone layer looks like. So essentially you have these different numbers, which give you, you should multiply by that by 10 to the power 12 to get how many molecules per centimeter cube roughly. But the basic message is this is the natural ozone layer, and it's in the middle of the stratosphere, around 25 kilometer, where you have the maxima. So lower than that, it's less in abundance, and again, above that, it's lower. Now, why I wanted to put this is because when I started teaching atmospheric chemistry in India, and other places too, where people were not familiar, for them, they would often get confused between stratospheric ozone and tropospheric ozone. And as you've heard in the previous talks, the surface ozone is really of concern when it exceeds critical thresholds. There are national ambient air quality standards for that. But the ozone above, let's say, 12 kilometer up to 50 kilometer, depending on the latitude and season, that's really the protective shield of the Earth. And I think with this sort of overview, I just wanted to flash some recent updates about stratospheric ozone, because, we were all quite happy thinking that the stratospheric ozone depletion. So just for the students, stratospheric ozone depletion did not mean that ozone was going down everywhere in the stratosphere and in all seasons of the year. It's basically a phenomena that was discovered over the Antarctic, which occurred in springtime in Antarctic, which happens to be September, October. Okay, so that particular phenomena, why it happens, people before me have also mentioned, has to do with the right sort of circumstances of a polar vortex forming, causing that part of the atmosphere to be deep coupled from the rest, and then very low temperatures going there. So I'll try to give you some basics of that. But what is very, very surprising was early this year in Nature, we found that there's been probably the most persistent Arctic ozone hole. Okay, so this is something that would not happen that frequently in the Arctic, but now, because some people think because of climate change, some people think because of the greenhouse gas emissions in the troposphere, the stratosphere over the Arctic is cooling. It might sound paradoxical, but the net consequence is that we had conditions conducive for Arctic ozone formation. And here you see a picture from that Nature article where essentially you see it's almost completely, this is 3 times the size of Greenland, just for reference, okay, over the Arctic. So we can't certainly, I wanted to start off by saying that we can't take off our eyes off the ball when it comes to stratospheric ozone. Yes, the Arctic ozone depletion is sort of on the mend, and we hope it will recover fully in a few decades. But now we have new hotspots opening up, especially the Arctic. So this was the article that was published in 2011. So before 2019 or 2020, the last occasion where we observed a very, very strong occurrence of Arctic ozone hole was in 2011. And you can see this paper, students can note it down, and I can also share this slide. So the question was, why is this occurring? Why wasn't this ozone hole occurring in the Arctic stratosphere persistently earlier on? Why was it occurring over the Antarctic? And I think there are many reasons when you go into details, but it all comes down essentially to the fact that the clouds that are responsible for the ozone depletion that occurs in Arctic now or Antarctic earlier is actually not normal clouds. They are called polar stratospheric clouds that are made up of nitric acid, dihydrate, trihydrate, and monohydrate. Okay, so they're very special. I'll show you a quick picture, but essentially in these, the what you see here, the temperature is in that part of when it gets below 197 Kelvin roughly, it's able to catalyze some reactions on its surface, these nitric acid hydrate crystals, which leads to a buildup of chlorine. Okay, so I'll just show you that part very quickly. Sorry, I put some tropospheric stuff. So this is the main reaction that sort of leads to the buildup of chlorine in the Antarctic under low temperatures. And in order to form the polar stratospheric clouds, you need those low temperatures. Okay, so that was the answer to that particular question. So now that I've told you a little bit about the stratospheric, update about ozone, Let me now tell you, some of you were asking about surface ozone, and especially about Indo-Gangetic Plain. So this is a calendar plot where the red hot colors show you days which were accompanied by really high ozone. Okay, so I think the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ozone is something around 100 microgram per meter cube, which is roughly about 50 ppb, given the temperature and pressure normally. And what we found, this paper was published in JJR by our group, is that it's about 2.5 years plus data, continuous measurement, that 62% of the time in a year, we actually are already in violation of the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And just to emphasize the point made by Professor Madhoolika and Professor Lisa Emberson and Professor Umesh, plants, their phytotoxic dose already starts at much lower thresholds of, let's say, 40 ppb concentration exposure. And that's well documented. It may be even more sensitive, certain cultivars. But for our ambient air quality standards are somewhere around 50 ppb. So we have a generous threshold. Maybe that also, Professor Umesh is on these committees. He can probably sensitize this policymakers. So the reason for that, extreme 62% of the days exceeding the air quality standard for ozone. Most of us, when we hear about pollution in India, we are it's completely hijacked by particulate matter, which is no doubt very important. But now we also have an increasing ozone pollution, as the previous speakers have highlighted. So this is just to tell you that this particular region of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, agriculturally very intensive. So there is one activity that is called crop residue burning that occurs twice a year, once for the wheat crop residue in summer, which is very bad for the ozone, and then also in October, November. Okay, so I don't have time to explain all of that, but what I wanted to show you very quickly was that the reactivity. So you have to take my word for this. The picture on your screen shows you how much of the total ambient OH reactivity. So you can think of this as the precursor of ozone formation. Okay, all the VOCs that are reactive enough. Ozone is formed through non-linear chemistry of VOC and NOx. So if you have a lot of these reactive hydrocarbon stuff out there in the air, they can make a lot of good ozone if you have the NOx too in the daytime. So just to tell you this, in the pre-harvest period in summer, it's the same season, same meteorological stuff, same fetch region. We have a very low value of around 228 per second. Okay, so that's like it's a moderate value for OH reactivity. But when the season is impacted by fires and their emissions, which emit all of this pollutants, then that jumps to 64 per second. So that's a very tremendous increase in the reactivity and the chemistry that's forming ozone. And finally, the last slide, just to leave you home with this message that we have to worry about the ozone both at the surface and in the stratosphere, if you look at the difference between these two periods, one where it's summertime, there are no fires of these crop residues, burning activity, and the other where you have the wheat residue fires. So this was already published. You see a 20 ppb enhancement in the peak daytime. And we actually then look whether this is because of photochemistry. So it turned out that the radiation was quite similar. We looked if it could be transported ozone. But then when we filtered for the local air masses, the enhancement went up even higher, which indicated it's not long-range transport. And finally, we put a proxy for biomass burning emissions, namely a biomarker called acetonitrile, which we measure quite well. And sure enough, that also showed enhancement. So this gave us the evidence that it's really these emission activities that happen. This is just a cesspool of what's formed. So I think with that, I think while we have made great success in solving the most pressing problem of Antarctic ozone depletion, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. And as climate change warms up, especially Professor Madhoolika was mentioning, the Indo-Gangetic Plain is going to be one of the global hotspots in terms of temperature increases too. Everybody knows that surface ozone and temperature have a very strong correlation. Okay, so we expect that this is going to be one of the hotspots globally for increased surface ozone. That's it from me. Any questions? I'd be happy to take them. And thanks for giving this chance.
Thank you very much, Vinayak. It was very informative, starting from the basic to that. And let me tell you that we are discussing the revision of the national ambient air quality standards. Hopefully, it will be done in years or so. In coming years, you will see the new standards relevant for the region. Thank you very much, Vinayak. Now,
Thank you, Umesh.
now,
Wonderful.
yes, thanks a lot. Now we have next. We have Ankita Katoch. She is young holistic leader. She is leading the quiz. Now she has something to declare. Several competitions we organized under ENVIS ages. There are a lot of participants were there. Now the prize declaration has to be announced. Ankita, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this opportunity. But before the results are declared, I think we had such great talks from such eminent speakers. I would like to ask a couple of questions to them. So, as we were talking about good air quality that we have experienced in the recent lockdown, and we saw that the particulate matter emissions and the NOx emissions went down. But ground level ozone did not show such a similar decrease. So usually when we are talking about ozone, as Professor Sinha also mentioned about VOCs, we're always looking at ozone formation with respect to VOC NOx ratio. So my question is, maybe Professor Sinha would like to take it up, that although like NO2 emissions went down, and NO2 is closely associated with ozone formation, but maybe we should also look at the VOC emissions in the cities, which lead to higher VOC NOx ratio, and which leads to enhanced ozone production, because even after shutting down everything, if the ozone levels are not going down, maybe we are not looking at some of the precursors which are already there, and maybe they are not being monitored regularly. So what is your opinion about that, sir?
Vinayak, please.
So Vinayak sir has left.
Okay, so then I request Dr. Ramesh, please.
Yeah, this evidence of this has already been pointed out by Professor Umesh Kulshrestha. Tropospheric ozone offset was happening because of plastic and other burning of other waste material in the capital. So banning of plastic waste burning has contributed to incrementally increase in ozone. That is one factor. And more or less the activity related to agriculture and activity related to other major transport systems. The city transport system has reduced, but intercity transport and other activities of agriculture-related activities, marketing and other things have not reduced during this time.
Right,
That's how
right.
we could not find significant decrease. But definitely, I have shown one of the slides. Concentrations were less during 2020, but there are some epochs where in some days it was more. But if you take an average sense, definitely it is less. My slide I have shown.
Yes, I saw that, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. Now, Ankita.
Yes, and sir, another question I have is related to crops, about which Professor Madhoolika talked in great detail. So, so she mentioned that we had like ozone is definitely impacting the crop productivity with respect to wheat, and certain cultivars are more sensitive. So, as far as air pollution stress is concerned, is it right to say that probably ozone is the most deleterious air pollutant for crops, or is it wrong to point finger at one particular pollutant because plant may be facing other stresses also? I ask this because I want to know her opinion about how we should, progress further. What kind of studies should be conducted with respect to air pollutants if we want to study crop productivity in great detail?
Yeah, it's a good question. What you said that among all the pollutants which are known, right now as a criteria pollutant in India, for which you have different standards.
Right.
Surely ozone is the most phytotoxic.
Okay.
And ozone has shown its widespread occurrence in areas beyond cities also. It's not only restricted, in the cities. When you say the cities, it's more in the suburban areas rather than in the downtown or in the middle of the city. So certainly, ozone is the most phytotoxic air pollutant for plants and the natural vegetation. And as you know that in natural conditions, the plants try to adapt to a particular situation by enhancing one or the other way. As I said, either avoidance of that stress, or if it cannot be avoided, then tolerating that stress. So that is
Right,
how
right.
the variability in their responses have been found there. But we, one very important observation which we have found, we have screened wheat varieties right from which have been developed 30 years back to this. So almost 39 or 40 varieties have been screened for the same ozone concentration, which is not very high. It's about 10 ppb and 20 ppb higher than the ambient concentration, which you are getting these days. And very clearly, it has been found that those which have been developed later, like from 2010 onwards, or maybe 2005 onward, they are more sensitive as compared to the older varieties. So one of the possibilities is there that the plant production, when it is being increased, it's more, for carbon fixation. So their stomatal flux of ozone may be higher, not maybe higher. In fact, we have done one experiment with one of the old and one of the of new cultivar, and we have found that the stomatal flux of ozone is higher in the new varieties as compared to the old varieties. So this kind of thing is very, very clear. And with the modeling work also, various groups are working on this thing. But what we have done, we do generate the data in the plant itself by measuring the stomatal flux, as well as, we send our data to the modelers, so that they can play on. So you are absolutely right, it is the most phytotoxic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a detailed explanation. Because I'd always heard your name, read your papers, but it is for the first time that I actually got to see you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I think everybody is very eager about, to listen about the results. So as the YoHo Young Holistic Program, we organized some competitions based for Ozone Day. One was a quiz competition for which we received almost 400 registrations, and the other was a painting competition with the theme Ozone for Life, which had about 132 participants. So I would declare the results for the quiz competition. So the first position for quiz contest goes to Mohammad Siptan Kadri from Bharatidasan University, Tiruchirappalli. Heartiest congratulations to you. Second position was it is being shared by three people: Akash Patil, Julino Jishu, and Rama Kumari. And the third position is also being shared by two people, Amardeep Singh and Avnika Singh. So my heartiest congratulations to all the winners, and in fact, I really want to appreciate all the participants, because I think winning does not matter. What matters is that we participate in as many activities we can. Similarly, I have the results of painting contest with me. So first of all, I would like to thank our jury members. The jury panel comprised of Dr. Sandeshna Rayappa, Dr. Usha Meena. Thank you for doing this for us, and Ms. Richa Sharma also. So we have divided the painting competition in various age groups. So the winners of Group 1, age 5 to 11 years were Deepshika De, Ananya Roth, and Vedant Saraswat. For Group 2, 12 to 18 years, Riya Jain, Aisha Pandey, and Archana Yogesh. You can see what they had painted for the theme. I think it was very exciting. For the Group 3, which is 18 plus years, we had Nitu Rani as the first, who got the first position. Shreyashi Das got the second position, and Akhil Kaseti got the third position. So our heartiest congratulations to everybody. And I would like to conclude by saying that YoHo is an outreach program. So all the students who are attending this webinar right now, please connect with us and participate in webinars as well as the activities that we might be conducting in future. So with that, I would like to thank all of you.
Thank you very much, Ankita. Now we have another young holistic leader, YoHo, Richa, Sharma. She will be talking about activity and also some observation about analysis of ozone what she done through some reports. Richa, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, is it visible?
Yes.
Yes. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, as we all know that today, we all have gathered here to celebrate the International World Ozone Day through this webinar, which has been organized through the YoHo programs, which is the Young Holistic Program of SES JNU New Delhi. The program was started by our Dean Sir with the aim of channelizing youth energy in positive direction and also to conduct various outreach activities, developmental activities as an outreach program of School of Environmental Sciences, JNU, New Delhi. Now, so as we all know that already various eminent scientists and researchers, they have spoken and made us aware about the ozone layer. So today, I, Richa Sharma, would like to add a few more words to the ongoing discussion by presenting a few slides on stratospheric ozone observation during COVID-19. So, what is said is that the ozone is healing. So how are we able to figure out that whether the ozone is healing or not? So during the corona pandemic crisis, it is witnessed that the largest hole in the ozone layer spreading over 1 million square kilometers above the Arctic has closed due to unusual atmospheric conditions. The hole was first identified by scientists in March earlier this year. Copernicus Climate Change Service and Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Services by the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecast confirmed the development. The ozone hole, as we can see before, earlier in 2008, and the changes which we are able to see in 2020. So according to the reports, the closing of hole has nothing to do with the reduction in levels of pollution amid lockdown. It's because of the polar vortex, high altitude currents that are responsible for bringing cold air to polar regions. Such holes in the ozone layer are quite common about the Antarctic at South Pole, especially during July to September, but the ozone layer hole above the Arctic at this time was unusual. It is believed that polar vortex, the high altitude currents. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Richa, you're audible. Please.
I'm audible.
The high altitude currents that are responsible for bringing cold air to the polar region is responsible for the healing of the layer. The ozone layer works as a protective shield as it prevents sun's ultraviolet radiations which can cause skin cancer from entering Earth. The hole above the Arctic Circle could have posed severe damage to humans if it has increased to populated areas. The Antarctic ozone hole is mainly caused by human-made chemicals, including chlorine and bromine that migrate into the stratosphere, a layer of atmosphere around 10 to 50 kilometers above sea level. So this is what we have figured out. The two images are showing the concentration of ozone layer on 16th of April 2020 and on 22nd of April 2020. This is all about it. And in the end, I would like to say that, depletion of ozone will lead the Earth towards mass extinction. It is time we come together and do our bit to preserve the environment by preventing the use of CFCs and embracing renewable energies and promoting sustainable mobility. And towards this direction, we have achieved a lot through Delhi Declaration, and now we know that we have replaced the use of CFCs with HFCs, and this will not further aggravate the stratospheric ozone depletion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richa. Very nice that observation. That is also one opinion that ozone hole has yes relation with HFCs and CFCs. Now I invite Swati Singh, Program Officer ENVIS, to propose a vote of thanks for all the speakers. And in fact, before that, I would like to summarize that we take a note of this, whatever you have spoken, we will prepare a report of that, and then we will send to concerned ministry. And I thank all of you for readily agreeing and sharing your views, coming online, because many experts of your level, they are having so much engagement on such a day. Several panel you have to go here and there. So online facility provides that benefit that we can log into different places. Thank you very much, making this event very successful. Thank you all. Swati, please.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to present vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, Dr. K.J. Ramesh, sir, Professor Madhoolika Agarwal, madam, Professor Lisa Emberson, ma'am, Professor Vinayak Sinha. Thank you for sparing your time and sharing with us such informative and detailed study. I think a lot of new ideas and research ideas would have been generated in young students' mind. I would also like to thank Professor Umesh Kulshrestha, sir, and Dr. Usha Meena, ma'am, for organizing and providing this opportunity. And last but not least, YoHo leaders, Miss Ankita and Miss Richa, thank you for sharing the activities and the result. And I would like to thank all the participants. Today we had house full, 100 on this side, and on other platform also we had participants. So it was really interesting and really encouraging to see such participation, such lectures, and I think we've had a very useful time today with all these activities. And thank you to all the participants of our competitions. Yeah, it was very encouraging to see young people, young students from school. As young as 5 years, I've also contributed to ozone painting, which is very, very encouraging and very positive to see that future generation is so interested in this subject. So thank you all. Thank you, participants. Thank you, panelists, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. There is one question in the last that can we send ozone-filled cylinder to ozone? Somebody has asked. That is not possible. But if anybody has any comment, please feel free to contact, write through email, see the website for your input, certificate, and other thing. You can contact Swati. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you, sir.
Madam, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Richa, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And Vinayak already left. Thanks a lot. Lisa, now tell me what happened. How is your lockdown affected? Please, something about your place I want to know. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, sorry. What was the question? Professor Umesh?
What is going on in New York about this pollution, shutdown, lockdown, schedules, offices, work from home?
Oh, lockdown. Yes. Yeah. So we're sort of in semi-lockdown at the moment, but I think we're seeing the cases of coronavirus start to rise again. So although term is about to start in 2 weeks' time here at York, we're kind of worried that the lockdown might become more severe again. So time will tell.
So this York was less affected than London?
Well, we've had local lockdowns in different parts of the country. So there have been a few cities in the north that have had to go into a more severe lockdown. I think London is largely, at the moment, okay. But I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see cases and hospital admissions increase again. Oh. So I think we'll see more lockdown, unfortunately. How about in India?
In India, we have, you may be reading that we have percentage is very less, but the number is high. And probably the regional conditions and food habit, spices, those things have helped Indian mortality rate is less. And but hopefully we have learned a lesson how to protect ourselves, and more facilities we will create. India is now taking that challenge ahead, medical facilities.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges we've had here is trying to develop a good test and trace system. I don't know how you've been dealing with that in India. I can imagine it's even far more difficult in India, but it's been a little bit of a shambles, to be honest, here.
We will do that. Sure, we will do. Madam, Banaras, what is Banaras? How is going on?
Banaras is, of course, much better than Delhi. But we have almost every day more than between 100 to 200 positive cases are coming. And the deaths also either 1 or 0 or 2 or something. So it's happening in BHU also. One of my students also got it. So still, university is not open for students, but research scholars, who have their experiments in the field, they used to come at least, to water the plant or to do some of those things, measurements which need to be done. Otherwise, the whole, the entire crop of the summer season and now in the rainy season, it's completely gone. So they all are just thinking what to do. But they can pick up very fast. They need to be mentally very strong. And as you said that there are spices and other things which are making them strong. So their mental strongness is needed at the moment. And
thank you, madam. Thank you very much. Dr. Ramesh, would you like to add some comment finally? Dr. Ramesh left?
I think he has left.
He left. Okay, no problem. And thanks a lot. Thank you all participants, students, speakers once again. It was nice.
Yeah.
Seeing you online. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Namaste.
All the best.
Namaste. Namaste. Convey my regards to Kevin, Lisa.
Yes, I will do. Yeah, thanks ever so much, Professor Umesh. Very nice to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.